Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the RedSeaPodcast. This is Dennis, and after a very confusing game, we sit here with our arms crossed and trying to scrape the positives, honestly. Gav, finally, man, you're back because Jesus, it's been a hot minute.
Yeah, no, my schedule, man. It's always something, but luckily I have some time today.
Wanna share your first thoughts on everything?
I mean, yeah, you know, I know you and I talked about it last week. I wasn't able to join the podcast after the first leg. Um, that's you can't do that in Europe and expect to qualify. Obviously, I know a lot of people were optimistic and had hope because of what happened last season with Maccabi. I think looking back on it, you kind of have to be realistic in the sense that I think obviously I think we had a stronger team last year. Guys like Fortunis, guys like Podense. Obviously, we had a fully healthy squad with El Kabi and Andreota and everyone being fully good for both legs. So that makes a major difference. But it was never going to be easy. And you saw that tonight. Olympiacos played much better than we did last week. We were clearly the much better side. Bodø they caught on to that early and uh, decided that they were going to make the game as choppy and physical and start stop as possible, and they achieved that goal. And somehow scored with their first shot, like I predicted, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, it was good to see in the second half at least. The guys kept fighting. Yaremchuk probably should have started. I don't fault Mendilibar for making a change just to try to see if something else would work. Um, but you know, it is what it is. Um, and they gave everything they had. So I guess that's the positive you take away. We won on the night, which puts us over Dinamo in the standings for uh, Champions League qualification if the winner of this season qualifies through their league. So we have that to look forward to. And we're still in the league in the cup. So take your anger out on Greece, win the double. I just you got to keep your head up from here. But it was a much improved performance from last week.
Surely you have to win the double now, and you are in more than prime position to win the double. As you said, it was more or less done, even though I was the more optimistic one of the two. I really thought that we would somehow go out firing and do it. Missed chances, as always, I have brought up a reoccurring point on the past few weeks on this show when you weren't available to join is that we have clinicality problem, and today with no striker at all in the start. Again, I'm not faulting Medellin. I said that I would like to see a squad like that to start off because you have to think that either way. I don't think Yaremchuk would have made a full 90. I really don't. Would it have been different if he played the first 45? Yeah, of course. Uh, but he came off the bench while when Bodo were tired, so that plays a part. A lot of things play a part. You can sit here and just pick apart what could have been, more or less what is now in front of you. I will disagree on a small point. I don't really think you can compare it to last year because, as you said last year, I think we went into the second leg with Maccabi with no injury. Correct me
hmm
if I'm wrong on that.
I'm pretty sure we had a fully healthy squad. I mean, El Cabi, Fortunis, Podense, Porta, Chiquinho. I mean, we had everybody.
And this year we're missing two of our most clinical players. One, our top scorer by a mile once again, and the other one that can cover all three positions behind the striker. We had to scrap for subs today. For God's sake, Biancon played centre forward, I think, near the end.
I
And
wanted him
almost
to score
scored as
so
well.
bad.
He almost did. He was so close. Uh, I'm gonna keep being, as I finish my first thoughts, I'm gonna keep being the more positive one, even though I have a rant and a half. It's a lot of positives to keep from today, even though you're out of Europe. And since you are in such a prime position to get it done in Greece, you're back in the UCL next season and even stronger than you exit Europe now.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at the schedules that's come through for the playoffs, we could be wrapped up after 3 match days if we take care of business. So, again, another positive there is that we just won't have Europe to balance with that. So, I mean, you would think that we can get that wrapped up before the reverse of the cup tie. That way, we can make sure we're fully rested there. Obviously, with a 6 goal lead on aggregate, I'm not too worried about that second leg, but it's good to be able to rotate regardless. So hopefully, uh, we can just really hit the ground running. And again, like I said, all the frustration and disappointment that I know that the players are feeling. I don't know if you saw that interview with RedSeaPodcast after the match, holding back tears. I know there's a lot of disappointment in the squad. Obviously, there's a lot of disappointment with the fans as well, but all you can do now is just channel that into something positive. Get the season wrapped up as quickly as we can so that we can rotate, so that we can start incorporating some of our youth players like Papa Canelos, who started to get some time over the past week. So it'd be great to be able to incorporate him in some of these playoff matches if the league is already wrapped up. So yeah, just you got to keep your head up and keep going. As disappointing as this is, as poor as we were in the first leg, it's over now. You just have to continue with the two competitions we're still in.
I was more or less gonna go into a whole different point, as you said, with the frustration of the fans, but you segued me perfectly into what I was gonna talk about afterwards, and that's of course Rechos. I didn't have the chance to see the interview, no, because I was rushing to to get everything up. Uh, but it goes back to the point where that I made on our show on Monday, on the 100-year anniversary show, that Rechos being the captain to wear that jersey on such a historic night and the captain in general this season is no coincidence. This is a kid that's been given nothing, that's fought for everything, tried his luck outside of Greece, came back after a relatively injury-full failed stint to a, a fan base full of doubters that just dug his grave more and more in that first season. He sat down, he worked hard, harder than ever, I'd say, improved every weakness that he has, and this year he's having from I'd argue from last year he's having the two best seasons of his career. And the fact that today, after what Jolakis went on to do, which Stella has me fucking stunned, uh, him taking the responsibility to go and play goalkeeper, because I'm pretty sure he's the one that took the responsibility. I don't think Mendelibar said, go play there. Uh, and after having arguably his best game of the season, I think that's a safe call.
I would say, funny
One
enough,
of.
I think he might have been better in the Lyon match. He
Yeah,
was
yeah.
he was unstoppable there. I mean, but he was fantastic today too. I mean, that was one of the things I sent to you even towards the end there. It's 87th, 88th minute. The game by that point was gone, right? We needed 2 goals. We weren't going to get them. But he was still flying around. 2 beautiful tackles, and of course, both of the Bodø players went down like they had gotten shot with a 50 caliber. Um, but he brought the fire today. Um, it's a shame that he didn't start last week. I think he probably could have, because he came on as a sub and looked like he was, you know, completely fine. But that's the kind of leader you want. just throughout the match today, you saw him, really being assertive, really trying to carry the ball forward at times, even from center back. Um, and he was really being the voice of the team. Um, one of the other things I noticed, he at halftime, obviously, Zveyer had a horrible, horrible, horrible game. The fact that he had to go to the monitor for the penalty, all of the antics that he put up with Bodø, we could talk about that endlessly. But as soon as that whistle went at halftime, RedSeaPodcast is in his face telling him, "You need to wake up." So I mean, I love to see that spirit from our players, and to everybody's compliments today. I think that the entire team had that, which is just again, I guess, gets back to my disappointment last week of why couldn't we have seen that in the first leg? Because this totally could have been the tie that we were in.
It's a massive what if, it really is. And yeah, I don't want to get into the. I have it noted down, but I don't even think it's worth it getting into the border time wasting because what did we expect? Honestly,
I
I don't
I
think I expected good.
I honestly expected it to be an open match to begin with. I thought the Boda were going to come in and try to score an early goal. So I was a little surprised and I guess disappointed at how they approached the match. And like you said, we won't talk about this too long, but you know, a team that beat us so thoroughly last week, a team that is clearly very good, to come and play like that, I think is a little embarrassing. But again, we can leave that there and not touch on it too much. Um, One thing I did want to talk about, like you mentioned briefly, was Tsolakis. Um, I think it's safe to say that he didn't have the best tie. Like you said earlier, I saw going back with some people. I don't necessarily blame him for any of the goals because again, when you're an open net from 4 yards out. I mean, how many times last week that third goal they walked it in, and then same thing today. So I think he was unfortunate on the goals, but
Which one?
Gelson, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because you know, despite the lack of end product, I think he ran himself into the ground today. Same thing with guys like Rodine. I mean, a lot of people are going to be critical of the missed penalty, and it was a very poor penalty, but the effort was there. So, at the end of the day, I don't think I'll go too deep on those guys, but yeah, I mean, we had what 27 shots tonight to Boda's 3. I mean, to only get 2 goals out of that is really disappointing. But yeah, I mean, it's just they were playing 11 behind the ball basically from the 5th minute when they realized that Olympiacos was up for it today. So, it's frustrating banging your head against a wall like that. But back to Tsolakis to finish my point. Didn't have the best tie. I thought that he looked a little less confident just in general than he has, which again has been the biggest part of his game. And I think it is worth remembering that he still is only 21, right? As fantastic as he's been over the past 12 months, dating back to that second leg against Maccabi, I think that was our only injury was Paskalakis. Uh, you know, as fantastic as he's been, it is worth remembering that he is still very young. And then speaking on the red card, personally, I don't fault him for it, and I think in a sense he might have saved the game because again, obviously it's a red card. It puts us down to 10. We had to put an outfield player in goal, but Boda had a free walk to the net if he doesn't try to make that tackle. So it's the right call. He absolutely deserved to be sent off. But I'm not. I don't really fault him for that. I think it's a play he had to make. It's a sacrifice he had to make, and in the end, it did end up paying off for us. The only negative there is that now next season our first match is going to be without Konstantinos Zalakis. So hopefully we either have an easy match or we don't qualify for the Champions League directly, and it's a qualifying match. But we'll see. We have all summer to figure that out, but that's kind of my take on him and what happened there. Personally, I don't blame him for the red card, even though he probably had his worst uh, tie with Olympiacos this tie. He just didn't look like he was as confident as he usually is.
I'm pretty sure you covered me more than fully, but given to what you said that he didn't have the best tie, I don't know if it was his worst, but it was certainly down there on the amazing list that he has of games in general with Olympiacos. But I can't sit here and blame Jolakis, and the fact that he is such an incredible keeper, such a wonderful keeper, especially for his age, he falls into that double-edged sword, if that makes sense. That even when you have a mediocre guy, because Jolakis wasn't bad, it's what I said on Twitter when a shot is taken from right fucking here. It's not the keeper's fault
No,
if it goes in.
that's the defense's fault for a guy being that wide open. I mean, and kind of to finish your point there, he was not bad at all. I said it last week. Um, if we had Pascalakis in goal last week, I think we concede 6 or 7 easily. I mean, he made a number of very good saves. Obviously, today he had nothing to do, but I think that criticism has to be measured. I think, like you've talked about, like we've talked about, there is a tendency for Olympiacos fans to be reactionary sometimes, and I think we're all guilty of that from time to time. But you got to kind of tamper it down. I think out of anybody to criticize for this loss and this performance, it's not Konstantinos Soulakis. He could not have done anything on any of the 4 goals that Bodø scored. Even if he did look a little shaky at times, none of those can be credited to him.
Before we get into my next point, which is Yaramchuk, because he deserves a segment of his own, as you mentioned at the start, I do want to talk about this a bit because I keep saying it. I said it on Twitter. I send you the tweet. I feel like I've said it every month, especially in basketball, but in games like this, it really carries over. It's not just Olympiacos fans. And again, I'll say the thing. This is episode 70, which is insane, and I think I've said this for like 65 of the 70 episodes. I'm not putting myself outside of any of this because I've been critical unfairly of many players, and I can name them openly. I'm very critical of my mistakes. But the fact that we sat at halftime, not even at full time, at halftime, chasing the Champions League qualification and a win that would give us way too much, even if it didn't give us a qualification now. Because as I kept saying, securing the Champions League helps the team in so many aspects. Whether that's player retention, there is a big chance now that we keep Kostulas and Mozakidis, for example, and Zolakis. Whether that's money, we get 40 million. We get 40 million. I don't think people grasp how much that will truly help us in the summer. And then there are people here on Twitter, especially because Jesus Christ, Twitter sometimes uh, that saying that Zolakis is at fault, which is crazy. Saying that Mendilibar is at fault, which does he take some criticism for today? Kind of, sort of. We'll get into that later, but I don't blame him necessarily. People were blaming solely Zelson, for example, which, as I said, the man can be frustrating at times. But Zelson isn't the player we have to score. That's why I said that when this sort of 11 was talked about yesterday, that I'd much rather see Palma start and not Zelson Martins up top. And there are people just finding excuses and excuses back to back to back to just blame something instead of supporting the team that's honestly going. You'd have to sit here and think that the Europa League was our only hope for a trophy this season with how much people started whining. we're going for a double. We're in prime fighting position for a double. As you said, 3 games in, the title may be wrapped up. And again, without Europe, it's such a chance as well for players like Papacanelos, like Lolis, like even, for example, if Pneumonides comes up, because there is a massive, massive chance to go back to back in the youth league, which we really shouldn't forget about. Players that perhaps don't get enough of a chance, like, for example, Anastopoulos maybe playing in the second capital sense, we are 6 goals up. This loss may be this win, but uh, missing out on the qualification may be very bittersweet, extremely bittersweet.
Well,
But
and I
there is,
think
go
go
on,
ahead,
go
sorry.
on. I was just gonna finish off by saying that there is so many positives still.
Well, and I think part of the disappointment that we have to remember, and I feel like I've gotten caught up in this a little bit too. Um, I think after winning the Conference League last season, expectations just went sky high, and I think we have to really remember, and it's a compliment to last season's achievement, right? As Panathinaikos have gone down 2-0. It's a compliment to last season's achievement, how difficult and how special that was, that we were able to make that run through Europe and beat the teams that we beat. It is incredibly difficult, right? I mean, we last season we beat Fenerbahce, we beat Aston Villa, we beat Fiorentina, and it can be really easy to get caught up in that and think, oh well, we should just never lose in Europe again. Um, Bodø Glimt are a very good team. They deserve to qualify. Nobody can argue that. Um, and it's difficult. Europe is difficult, and it's okay to not win every single season. We had a very good group stage showing, and really outside of that, the first leg against Bodø, I think that was really our only bad performance in Europe this season. I think we just really have to, you know, reposition our expectations and recognize that, you know, just because we achieved what we achieved last season does not mean that should be the expectation every year. We should feel incredibly lucky if we ever get to see this team make a run like that again. It could never happen again, right? So it's just we have to reframe that for ourselves, and we have to stay realistic. Um, this was always a possibility. We said before the tie, after the draw, Bodo were going to be a tough team. We had to be prepared for the fact that this could happen, and it did. So be realistic, like you said, be positive. I was super negative last week, and again, that part of that was probably me being overreactionary as well. But at the end of the day, this team is still on track to have a great season. Just because we did not reach the heights of last season does not mean that it's a failure. And we just keep moving forward. Like you said, Champions League is huge as far as being able to continue this project, to keep a lot of these players we have, obviously the young guys, but also guys like El Kabi, guys like Gelson Martins, Chiquinho, Andreota. I mean, if we have that qualification, not only is it easier to keep the existing players we have around, but also new signings, right? Well, not only will we have so much more money to spend, we'll have Champions League football as a selling point, and that's important to a lot of guys. So, you know, at the end of the day, it was not a complete loss. We end up getting something out of it, and you just got to move forward and realize that Europe is difficult. This was never meant to be easy, and this outcome was never off the cards for anyone to think this was unexpected. I think that's kind of on you for having too high of expectations.
And for the love of God above, this was the round of 16 of the Europa League. We didn't go out in the group stage. This was the round of 16. This is still, as you said, we had arguably one bad performance in Europe this season, because the Leon loss is a bit Uh, but we had one bad performance. We went 7 undefeated in Europe.
And we
Seven
played
undefeated.
10 matches in Europe this season, and we only lost 2 of them. I mean, again, you have to look at it. This is the beauty and the pain of these ties is it's 2 matches. You can have one really bad performance and that can doom you. Um, so again, when we're looking back on this season, I hope that people are able to um, kind of get over the disappointment and realize we had a very good campaign. You know, we only conceded 7 goals in 10 games too. That's the other crazy thing. As poor as we were conceding goals in this tie, we still conceded less than a goal per game in Europe, playing a lot of very good teams. We only had the 2 losses, and only one of those was a bad performance. So you just need perspective. And then, like you said, some of the reactions you would swear we're never going to win anything again, and that the season is over because of this. We're still alive in 2 competitions. We're still in fantastic position in both. So just set our sights to that. That's what the team said in their post. Onwards to our next goals. That's what it's got to be. Keep the heads up.
And another thing to point out that we glossed over like it's absolutely nothing. We had the best defense in the league phase.
Yeah, and I mean,
Over
if you
teams like Lazio, like Bilbao, like Roma, like whoever.
And if you still look at it by the end of this competition, we could still end up having the best defense when you look at goals per game. So I mean that's still on the cards. That again, it goes to show you one match. It was one bad performance that did us in out of 10. I mean, if a team is going to beat you like Bodø beat you, you just tip your cap. They did what they did. They were fantastic in that first leg. They were unplayable in that first leg. They probably beat any other team in the competition with that performance in the first leg. Sometimes it happens. We had a much better performance today. We restored respectability to the scoreline. We got the win that we needed to move up in the club standings, and you take that.
And with Lazio's fan ban in the first leg, I'm not sure that Lazio will beat them either, to be honest. Uh, and I don't know if you did catch it. I did sort of look forward thing to the draw of the Europa League in general. The first thing I pointed out about Bodo, aside of course the changing conditions there and stuff like that, is that Bodo's clinicality offensively is insane. And we saw that over both. They
Yeah.
had what in total, like 6, 7, 8 chances that could have realistically gone in, and they scored 4 of them.
I mean, they had one shot on goal today. They had 2 total shots, and they scored their one shot on goal. I mean, at a certain point, again, as frustrated as I was with how they played, and we could again talk about that for ages, and we won't. As frustrating as they were very good. You cannot take anything away from them. They deserved to go through. They were much more clinical than we were. Granted, I think if we had Ayuba Kabi, this is probably a very different tie. I have a feeling we probably score a goal last week, and we probably had more goals than us today if he played. But like we said again, that's Europe. You're not always going to have your best 11 players, and you have to make do. And unfortunately for us, we were playing a team that is in their preseason right now, fully healthy, and have had the past 3-4 months off. It's just unfortunate. That's how it happens sometimes.
I don't think there is a better way to say it. It's Europe. That's Europe, especially the Europa League. But speaking of the striker today, because he does deserve to be talked about even a little bit, what you caught the tweet? I'm pretty sure you did quote it as well. Yaremchuk once again proving that he is the most unstable striker this team has ever seen in the past decade. Yaremchuk will either perform like he did last week, or Yaremchuk will either perform like he did today, coming off the bench, scoring 2. It's very safe to point out that he scored 2 incredible goals. Both goals were amazing today. And
I
he
mean,
almost won us the fight. He almost got us through. He did win us the tie, but
yeah,
he almost got us through.
I mean, we all saw how incredible Hiking was over these two matches. He saved a penalty today. He had 6 saves today. Let me look at what he had last week, just because I need to have this in reference.
About the same, if not more.
He had 11 saves over the two ties, and here comes Roman Yaremchuk. Like you said, he's an inconsistent player, he's an unstable player, but I always look at some of the intangibles that a guy can bring to a team. Um, he always does come with intensity. You can always tell when he is playing, even when he is not doing well, which has been most of this season. The effort is there, the drive is there. He gets involved, and he doesn't put his head down. He could have come in today and been sulking across the pitch because he felt like he should have started, and he probably had every reason to be frustrated that he wasn't starting. He clearly showed it in his performance, but he came out and did what he had to do. He pushed this team forward. Like you said, he had 2 incredible finishes against a very good and clearly informed goalkeeper. So he deserves a ton of credit, and I think whether he stays with Olympiacos or whether this is his only season with us, I think it should be remembered the contributions he did make in this tie in the first leg against Ike. I mean, he never stops, and he keeps going, and he has a great attitude. So I think that is always worth remembering and crediting to a player who's having a rough year, and hopefully he can continue it. We'll probably need him down the stretch some more. Who knows when El Capi is going to be fit? I don't know what his injury situation is because Mentilibar said he was going to play yesterday, and then the squad came out. We don't know what happened there. So we might need him some more. And I was really glad to see him come on and have the performance he had today, and prove a lot of those doubters wrong. I made that joke tweet yesterday about how will you respond in 17. He responded. He came on and he did everything he could, and like you said, he damn near got us back in the tie. I mean, the fact that we even had a game in that second half after going down 4-0. That is Roman Yaremchuk, and another player who I think gets a lot of credit. They both came on at the same time. Roman Yaremchuk scored both of the goals. Thrylos Mozakidis assisted both of the goals. He also, again, gets a ton of credit. Just that he continues to come in and be so good. Like we talked about, he had a rough game last week, which I don't fault him for in the slightest. Like, he's 18, his first knockout tie in Europe, in senior Europe, playing in the fucking Arctic Circle on artificial turf. I don't fault him at all for having a rough game. He came in today and he was another instant fire starter. He got both of the assists. He almost scored. He was everywhere at all times. So that's another shout out I think that we should give and talk about, as well as Thrylos Mozakidis again being incredible.
One last thing about Yaremchuk is that, in addition to what you said, having such amazing attitude while having all the things you have in your mind off the field, which does play a part, and you have to mention it almost every time you talk about Yaremchuk. And he will live with Betancourt coming in. I can't see any scenario in which Yaremchuk stays with the team, but he'll be remembered fondly and perhaps in a funny way. Now, Mozakidis, another man, of course, that could have made this tie very different would be Kostoulas, but Mozakidis stepped up more than anyone perhaps expected, and along with Yaremchuk, you can't say this in any way to underestimate it. As long as we finish the job in the league, they got us Champions League football with 2 goals and 2 assists. They got us Champions League football. Like, that's way more important than it is to be said so casually. So of course they deserve all the credit. Do you have to go?
Here in a few minutes. As long as we wrap up like in the next 5, I should be good. I just gotta go eat lunch.
Yeah, but I mostly want to focus on like one more performance and then give our MVPs and then it will be done. And the one more performance, actually a combination of performances that I want to focus on is Costinha and Rodinei. Once again, that very, very criticized right side has been so good when they play together. Rodinei has found a new self completely when he plays up top. And Costinha, for me, has been not only one of the best transfers of last summer, along with Pirola, uh, but he's been arguably one of our best players in general this season, and for sure the biggest surprise of the season. I can't name a bad performance on his end, and the chemistry he has with Rodinei is unbelievable, really, and that's showed today as well.
Here's my hot take about Costinha, and you might completely disagree with me. Last 10 years, top 3 right backs,
I
him,
mean,
Rodinei, and El Abdellaoui.
why disagree?
I don't know.
Who is above, especially in the right back position?
I mean, I don't know. I thought maybe that was a crazy thought, but maybe it isn't.
No, I think it's
j-
not at all, actually.
to go on what you said, I mean, he has been consistently fantastic for us this season on a player that we had no expectations for. I think we brought him in similarly to Bruno, and he is showing some great signs in his early career with Olympiacos as well. We brought him in for cover, right? I don't think any of us at the beginning of the season saw Costinha as a guy that would be starting for us in the knockout rounds of Europe, and not only starting for us, a non-negotiable starter. He had to play, and he was fantastic again. And speaking about Rodine as well, obviously he had the penalty miss today, which is disappointing. But he ran himself into the ground today. He, by the end of the game, you could tell, could barely move. And that wasn't because he was, not trying or anything like that. It was because he literally gave everything he had. So, I was glad to hear, after he missed the penalty, Gate 7 chanting his name. Obviously there's always going to be those rough moments in games for a player, but he was fantastic for us again, even if there wasn't anything to show for it, for him individually. Um, just another great leader to have on the team. I mean, having him and Veretsos together, I mean, two guys who, you know, could end up being like all-time Olympiacos captains by the time things are said and done. I mean, we're incredibly fortunate to have both of them, and Rodine specifically. The fact that he's doing this at the age he's 33 now, right? I mean, he's not.
33 to 34, yeah.
I mean, for a right back or a winger, usually you start to see guys slow down a lot by that point. And he runs around better than some of these guys who are 10 years younger than he is. So I mean, that speaks a lot to his passion and the spirit he brings, and you just see it as well. Like he seems like such a down to earth guy who really gets the club, which is rare to see with a foreigner. Um, you know, Rodine is a guy that I like. I think we joked about this a while ago. I would love to see him get like naturalized and play for the
He,
ethnic. I think
he's never going back to Brazil. I think we
no,
know
I
that.
mean
Right? He said he's not leaving this country, like ever.
genuinely, if there's some way we could figure that out, he would start for us right now. Easily. No, you don't miss me with Vagianidis. Rodine is the best right back in Greece. Maybe challenged by Costinha, maybe, but I still think he holds the title. But like you said, both those guys, so much credit. They do so many things well on and off the pitch, and regardless of performances, even when they do struggle, like Rodine did with the missed penalty. Um, they always give you something positive to look back on. So that's huge for us to have, and it's great having both of them at the club.
And to very slowly wrap up, I just want to give a massive applause to not only Gate 7 but the fans in general today, because they not only picked it up where they left it on Monday, but they once again put up a show that whole of Europe will be talking about for months. And our fans are proving once again, thankfully, not only in football anymore, both in the volleyball game yesterday, in the basketball games now, that we are one of the most fierce fan base in the world in general. And I just want to sit here and more or less defend, because I like criticizing, but I don't like demolishing players. The hate Ortega got today for me is fucking stupid, and that's all I have to say.
No, I mean, he was rough last week. I'll give him that. I don't think there was anything wrong with his performance today. Um, but again, I think he's a guy who's had probably, if you look through our 11, uh, not to say he's had a bad season, but he hasn't had a great season. He's probably, I would say, out of the 11, our worst performer on the season. But again, like we've said about a lot of these other guys, he always brings the effort and the intensity, and to a certain point, uh, that's the most I can really ask for from a player, because things will happen in games, and part of it as well. I mean, you look at him in the squad. Francisco Ortega is definitely not going to go down as an all-time talented player for Olympiacos. He's a very solid player. He's just surrounded by probably the best Olympiacos team that has ever walked the earth. So of course he's going to look worse than the guys around him. Of course he's going to look worse than Rodine, because again, we're talking about a guy who could be on the Olympiacos Mount Rushmore at some point. I mean, it's just, I think, again, it's the perspective that we frame things. Francisco Ortega, I don't think, did anything today to warrant any sort of criticism. He, like everybody else, was all over the place. He ran himself into the ground. Maybe you could say he was out of position for the goal, but, it happens. He tried, he gave his all, and that's all we really asked for. To build on your point about the fans, I do want to talk about them as well. I think, at least from me watching it on a screen, it felt like it was one of the best atmospheres that the fans have ever put on in the stadium for Olympiacos. It even sounded louder to me than the Villa match, which again, I'm not there in person, so I can't accurately judge that.
I can vouch for the Villa match. I don't think so, but
Okay.
it for sure was up there. The things that I, the way the stadium was at the Villa match, and the things that I saw, but that they will be very, very hardly matched. But today was definitely up there with one of the all-time best.
Well, and I think another thing to credit the fans for as well. I was a little worried coming into this match, um, because when you're in a tie like this and you're down big, the second something goes wrong, a lot of times the crowd can turn on the home team. I was worried that was going to happen if Bodø did end up scoring first, which they did. But all credit to the fans in the stadium. They stayed behind the team. They stayed behind our players. Like when Rodine missed the penalty, they were chanting his name. They were urging the team forward. They were clapping them off at full time after we lost. I think there's a lot of credit goes there. People, when they think about incredible atmospheres in football, obviously it's always gonna be, oh, who's the loudest, who's the most hostile, this and that. I think how you support your team is a big part of it as well, and how you stay behind your team, um, especially after some of the really bad performances we've had in Europe the past few years, where I think uh, the fans would have had more than enough reason to be jaded, and easy to turn on our team. they didn't do that today, and it was fantastic support from minute 1 to minute 90. So, like you said, really, really good account of ourselves on and off the pitch today is I think the big takeaway.
And as we slowly end the season, the one thing I'll say is the one thing I've said the past few shows as well. Stay together as one behind this organization in general, because this year can bring us so many historic moments. So many historic moments. Give me your MVP for today, and we are about done. We got close to an hour, which thank you again, because
No problem. I think you have to give it to Yaremchuk. Again, for him to come in cold and really take the game by the scruff, I think that says a lot about him. A couple other guys I think are definitely in that conversation. Like we've talked about, Panos Redsos was fantastic again today. Probably one of his top 5 performances for Olympiacos ever. Thrylos Muzakidis again was also fantastic, but I would have to give it to Roman Yaremchuk. And on a bit of a funny, lighter note, I was just thinking about, seems like he loves to score against Russian goalkeepers. Talking about the off the field stuff, he got the goal against Lodigin against Panathinaikos. He scored 2 against Haikim today. Maybe we just need to play teams that have a Russian goalkeeper, and he'll be the greatest footballer of all time. Who knows?
Finishing breaking El Capi's record from last year. Thank you all once again. I'll see you all tomorrow after the very important EuroLeague derby against Panathinaikos. And Gav, hopefully I'll have you back on for the Greece game. If we will work it out, we'll somehow work it out.
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
Next week I should have some availability.
Yeah, thank you for joining me after so long. Uh, I've been telling people the work you put on the show backstage, even when you don't have time to come on. So, of course, everyone is grateful that you're on this with me. The giveaway is done. The winner is announced on Twitter. I'll announce him on Instagram as well, because I was rushing to get on here. Everything is covered by Gav. I've said this before, I'll say it again. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you all once again.
Yep. Good to be here,
Thank you.
and see you guys next week.